second. So, right, 5, 8, 19, 5, 8, 19. Okay, so this question 5 here says, where is it? Yeah, in the UK, attempts to encourage people to change from road to rail travel by the introduction of a system of road pricing were forecast to have little effect because people like using their cars too much, right? So the government is trying to switch people from using cars to railway, but that wasn't very effective because people like to use their cars. That's what the statement says. How would this forecast be explained? The price elasticity of demand is for cars is high. The price elasticity of demand for petrol is high. The price elasticity of demand for rail travel is low. The price elasticity of demand for car travel is low. Interesting, right? The price elasticity demand for car travel is low. What do you think, Ilsa? So what was the confusion? So think about it. If people are not trying to switch from one product to another, think about this. Same as the challenge in Pakistan. Since though we have a good public transport, at least in the bigger cities like Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, but still a lot of people use their private cars. They don't prefer public transport. So what is the reason for that? What's the reason for that? And even though nowadays private transport is also, private cars are also expensive, but people still use private cars. What's the reason for that? Is the price elasticity high or is the price elasticity low? Is the price elasticity for a product should be high or should it be low? It should be low, exactly, right? The price elasticity of demand for car travel is low, right? It's inelastic, right? Right? So even though government is trying to encourage people to use public transport by increasing the prices of the private transport, but still people are using that. So 5 is D. Is this simple? Right? So what was your confusion with that? Did you get confused with more elastic and less elastic? Right, I can totally explain you A and B. So A says the price elastic demand for cars is high. So this means that people are more sensitive to change in the price of cars. Whenever I say that the demand for this product is more price elastic, what it actually means is that if the price changes even a little bit, there will be more change in demand. So simplest example of that could be, right? So if I say that after introduction of Netflix, cinema demand has become more price elastic. So what do you understand out of that? Now, even if so that basically means that since now there is a close substitute available, equally good substitute that people can sit at their homes and watch a movie, so they don't feel like going to the cinema. So if cinema is increasing their prices, then people will switch. Then people will switch from going to a cinema to watching movies at home. That's what it means. So this statement would have meant that the price elastic demand is high, that even if there is a small increase in the price for cars, the decrease in demand will be huge. Does it make sense, Elsa? And the B says the price elastic demand for petrol is high. Again, so when demand for petrol is high, it means that any small increase in the price of petrol, any small increase in price of petrol would result in big decrease in demand for petrol because people are sensitive. So basically what it means, more elastic means people are more sensitive to change in price. Less elastic means that people are less sensitive to change in price. More elastic, less elastic. So always remember, more elastic would mean, right? So more elastic would mean more sensitive, right? Less elastic would mean less sensitive, right? So more and less elastic, right? Right? That's what you should remember. Got it? Perfect. Now let's move to the next question then. 8. Okay. Vanilla is an important ingredient in the production of ice cream. Between 2011 and 2018, the price of vanilla increased from about 100 USD per kg to nearly $600 per kg. The diagram shows the market demand for and supply of ice cream. The original equilibrium is at X, which point illustrates the effect of this price rise in the market for ice cream. Okay. Right? So vanilla prices are increasing. So what would that do? So if originally the equilibrium was at X, so if originally the equilibrium was at X, right? And now an ingredient, vanilla is an ingredient in the ice cream. So when the price of that thing increases, what should happen? Should that affect the demand or should that affect the supply? So when the cost of production is increasing, because what is an ingredient? Ingredient is cost of that contributes towards cost of production, right? No. That's incorrect, right? So Ilsa, remember, whenever the cost of production is increasing, cost of production for something is increasing, right? That shifts the supply curve to the left, right? Because it's becoming more expensive to produce. Why are you thinking demand is from the consumer end, right? Demand is from the consumer end. So cost of production causes a shift in supply, right? So in this case, when the supply shifts to the left, so your new equilibrium would be at point C. Your new equilibrium should be at point C, right? Is the answer C? So your cost of production is increasing. Great, perfect. So if this is clear, then let's move to the next question, 19. Okay. Under which combination circumstances will the policy of increasing the money supply be most effective at moving an economy out of recession? The policy of increasing the money supply be most effective at moving the economy out of recession. Depreciating exchange rate, circumstance 2, global financial crisis. High nominal interest rates, appreciating exchange rate. Okay. Low aggregate demand, high inflation rates above the target level. Low nominal interest rates, no spare capacity available. Okay. Interesting. So low aggregate demand above the target level. Global financial crisis. Okay, interesting. If your exchange rates depreciate, then the demand should increase, but the global financial crisis would be most effective at moving an economy out of recession. No spare capacity available. Low nominal interest rates. Okay. So which option did you select? I think it should be D. I think the answer to this should be D. Is the answer D? B. Interesting. High nominal interest rates, appreciating exchange rate will be most effective at moving the economy out of recession. B is absolutely incorrect. Right? So think about this. What is a recession? Recession is basically low aggregate demand. So when people are not consuming that much, the demand is low in a country, that's a recession. Now, to fight recession, what you need to do is to lower the interest rates. Why would you lower the interest rates? Because then people will borrow more, they'll consume more, spending will boost, and therefore there will be more economic activity in the country, right? Are you getting me? Now, why I'm saying B should be incorrect? Because think about this. Firstly, you're increasing the interest rates. So that means that will discourage borrowing, right? So when interest rates are high, that discourages borrowing and that leads to less economic activity. And secondly, when your exchange rate is appreciating, that means that demand for your products will decrease, right? For other countries, your exports are more expensive. So your demand for exports will decrease. Therefore, it will not, in fact, it will be opposite to what you want to do. It will be opposite of being able to fight the what is that called? Fight the recession, right? A is also not making sense. Did you get this part, Ilsa? The explanation that I just gave you. So whenever there's a recession, what needs to be done, that interest rates should be decreased. Right? Because otherwise it will discourage. If it's increasing, it will discourage borrowing and consumption, right? And A was, I initially thought A could be an answer, but that doesn't make sense. So exchange rate is depreciating, so the demand for your exports will increase. That's a good thing. But the problem is, if there's a global financial crisis, who would buy from you? If there's already a pandemic going on. So just think about this. So during COVID, what was the case? Every country was facing a recession. Even if Pakistan had weaker exchange rate, we would have never been able to export much. Why? Because there's no country demanding that. They are themselves facing a recession. Are you getting me what I mean? So the best option would have been lower interest rates and no spare capacity. So when there's no spare capacity and the demand is increasing, what will producers do? Producers will try to produce more. They'll borrow more, they'll increase their production capacity and stuff like that. So I'm pretty confident that for this question, at least, the answer is incorrect in the marking scheme, right? But yeah, sometimes I do make these mistakes. Okay, now 25, 26, 27, 25, 26, 27. Okay, now the diagram shows the aggregate demand AD1 and AD2 and aggregate supply AS1. What could cause the shift in aggregate demand from AD1 to AD2? A rise in interest rate, a rise in output per worker? No. A rise in budget deficit? Yes. A rise in the value of the exchange rate? No. The answer should be C. Is the answer C? Right? So what is aggregate demand made up of? Elsa? What is aggregate demand made up of? Aggregate demand is made up of C, which is consumption, plus I, which is investment, plus G, which is government spending, plus exports minus imports, right? Now, this being said, right? So that should be correct. It should be correct. So 25 is B. Wow. Have they gone out of their mind? A rise in output per worker? No. Because rise in budget deficit will mean that the government is spending more, there are less of taxes, and therefore aggregate demand increases. Incorrect. I'm just surprised how they have made the marking scheme. That's incorrect. Yeah. So with more labor productivity, so B was saying that output per worker is increasing. So this relates to productivity. So when productivity increases, that causes your aggregate supply, not the aggregate demand, but the aggregate supply to shift outwards. So in the case of more output per worker, your aggregate supply would have shifted outwards, right? So that's incorrect. That's incorrect. 26. The government of an open economy with an overvalued currency decides to abandon its fixed exchange rate in favor of floating exchange rate. Which macroeconomic policy aim is least likely to be met because of this change? Floating exchange rate. Now they're going for floating exchange rate. Overvalued currency. I mean, it's stronger than what it should be, right? Least likely. A low rate of inflation, your currency will become weak. So when your currency becomes weak, okay, a low level of unemployment, currency becomes weak. A reduced balance of payments deficit, that's correct. A sustainable rate of economic growth, that's also correct. Low level of unemployment, that's correct. A low rate of inflation. A low rate of inflation. I think it should be A. Is it A, Ilsa? Is it A? Yes. Okay, perfect. Think about this. Now, this was a tricky question, but let me explain you what it basically meant. You are an open economy. What's an open economy? Open economy is any economy that trades with other countries. Open economy is an economy that trades with other countries, right? Okay. Then the second thing is overvalued currency. What does overvalued currency mean? It means that it is stronger than what it should be. Overvalued means it's stronger than what it should be, right? Okay. Now, previously it was a fixed exchange rate where you were maintaining a certain value. Now it's a floating exchange rate. So what happens in the floating exchange rate, right? So floating exchange rate adjusts itself automatically. Floating exchange rate adjusts itself automatically. So if previously the country was maintaining a stronger exchange rate and now it's a free floating, then obviously the exchange rate value would come down. It will decrease, it will depreciate. When that happens, right? So it said that what is most likely to happen, which is most likely to happen, right? Now, the other things will be likely to happen. B, C, and D are the statements that are likely to happen with weaker exchange rate. Is the first part clear, Ilsa? That think about this. You had an open economy, which means you trade with other countries. You had an overvalued currency, which means that you were artificially maintaining a stronger currency, right? Ideally, it should have been weaker, but you were artificially maintaining a stronger currency. Now, when you move to free floating exchange rates, your obviously currency will depreciate because in free floating, it's all based on the demand and supply of currency. So it will come back to its original level. It will come back to its original level. Now, when your currency depreciates, the question is basically simply asking you that which aim is least likely to be met, right? So think about B first, a low level of unemployment. No, when your currency is weaker, what happens? Your exports, the demand for your exports will increase. When the demand for exports increase, what happens? Your employment will increase because there will be more labor needed in producing the exports. Is this clear? The B part. Then for the C part, again, that is the same thing, reduced balance of payments deficit. Yes, your balance of payment deficit will reduce. Why? Because weaker exchange rate means more demand for exports. More demand for exports mean that your overall deficit will decrease, right? Your balance of payment deficit. Elsa, are you following? And similarly, D also is likely to happen, a sustainable rate of economic growth. Why? With weaker exchange rate, you export more. And with exports, you get to grow. You get to grow your economy, right? So B, C, and D are likely to happen with weaker exchange rate. But what is not likely to happen with weaker exchange rate is low rate of inflation. How so? Think about it. When you want to import something from another country and your exchange rate is weak, right? You have to give more units of your local currency. You are giving more units of your local currency to buy the import, right? So that would mean what? That would mean inflation would increase because you are now importing goods at a much higher price. You're importing goods at a much higher price. Got it? Imports are expensive, right? Very good. So let's move to 27. Devaluation always has the effect of decreasing the price of imports, decreasing the value of imports, worsening the balance of payments, worsening balance of payments, worsening terms of trade, worsening terms of trade. The price of exports divided by price of imports. So when your currency is, exchange rate is devaluing. I think it should be D. Is the answer D? Yeah, the answer is D. So yeah, so let me tell you, B is also correct. Initially, I thought it's B, but then I thought about other options as well. So Ilsa, imports, think about this. Always, the question says always. The value of imports will decrease most probably. The value of imports will decrease most probably, but not always. How so? Because what if the import is price inelastic? What if the import of the good, if the nature of the product is such like oil, even if oil prices are increasing or if our exchange rate is getting weaker, oil is something that we have to import because that is used to run factories, that is used to make electricity, that is used to do other stuff. Are you getting me? So this being said, most probably the value of goods decreases when your exchange rate is becoming weaker, your imports are more expensive, so you'll decrease your value of imports. But not always, because sometimes the price elasticity of demand is inelastic for imports like oil or other important things like military goods and medicines, vaccination. Think about vaccination, right? So you have to import all these things. So not always. But how is D correct? D is correct because what is terms of trade? Terms of trade is index of export prices, index of export prices divided by index of import prices. So when import prices will reduce, why will import price become reduced? Because, right? Because your currency is becoming depreciated. Your currency is becoming depreciated. So export prices will decrease and import prices will increase. Therefore, overall, your terms of trade will worsen. Is making sense? So export prices divided by import prices. That's the formula of terms of trade. So this will be going down with your weaker exchange rate. This will be going up with your weaker exchange rate. Overall, your terms of trade gets worsened. Right? Right. Okay. Think about this. What is the formula of terms of trade? So terms of trade only shows you export prices divided by import prices. Now, what does weaker exchange rate mean? So previously, if let's say $1 used to buy 100 rupees, $1 used to buy you 100 rupees. Now $1 is buying you, our currency is becoming weaker. How much? 150. How much is it buying you? 150. Ilsa, is this clear so far? Because devaluation, let's think from Pakistan's point of view, right? Now, this being said, right? Okay. What about export prices? Previously, they used to give you $1 and buy goods worth 100 rupees. Now they give you $1 and they buy goods worth 150 rupees in Pakistan, right? So in their terms, in their, in the foreigner terms, export prices are cheaper now. The products that we export, their prices are relatively low. Their prices are relatively low. And for us, previously we used to give $100 and buy goods worth $1. Now we give 150 rupees, and we are only able to buy $1 worth of good, right? So what it actually means for us import goods, the goods that we import are becoming more expensive. The goods that we import are becoming more expensive, right? Make sense? Right. Okay, perfect. So let's move on. And you said 28 as well, right? So 25, 26, 27, 28 as well, or were you able to solve this? Yeah. Okay, right. Are there any other questions from this exam? If not, then we can move to a new paper. Right, sure. Tell me a year. Which year you want to? Which year you want to do? May, June 2021, 1, 2. May, June 2021. Okay, sure. May, June 2021. One, two, you said. Sorry. 1, 2 is the marking scheme. And then where's the 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2? Here's the question paper. So this is May, June 2021, and this is right 1, 2. And this is May, June 2021. This is March. Oh, so we have to talk about, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So May, June, just a second. May, June, summer 1, 2, right? So I think this should be the marking scheme. Yeah, this is May, June. Okay, let's get started. So let's start from the top, right? So here's the first question. Okay, can you see the screen? A tourist visits the coast for a holiday. On her first day, she visits the local tourist office for information, goes for a swim in the sea, spends the evening enjoying the view of the coastline, and rents a campsite for an overnight stay. Which activities involve economic goods and which involve free goods? So which are right? Okay, sure. Okay. The question says which policy will not involve a reduction in the rate of inflation? Increasing income tax, reducing government spending, reducing interest rates, removing subsidies. Right. Which policy will not cause a reduction in the rate of interest? Yeah. What do you think? Yeah. No. So I've just explained, when you are reducing interest rate, what does that do? Think about it. It encourages borrowing. So interest rates are low. It's cheaper for the people to borrow, right? It's cheaper for the people to borrow. They take loans, they invest in businesses, they consume, they buy goods and services. When there is more aggregate demand, when the aggregate demand is higher because of that, what does it do? It increases your spending. When aggregate demand is higher, that results in higher price level because there is demand pull inflation. Do you remember? There's demand pull inflation. Is making sense or not? Right? So think about this one more time, right? So when aggregate demand is increasing, your aggregate demand curve shifts to the right. Your aggregate demand curve will shift to the right, like this. And therefore, have a look at this. So this was your original aggregate demand. This was your original aggregate supply, right? And on the y-axis, what do you have? On the y-axis, you have general price level. You have general price level, right? Now, this was your original general price level, right? This much. Okay. Now, when the aggregate demand increases, when your aggregate demand increases, it shifts to the right, right? It shifts to the right, and therefore your general price level would be higher. So demand pull inflation, right? Reduction, which it says, which will not cause a reduction, So when you reduce interest rate, aggregate demand increases, obviously inflation will increase. So B is incorrect. Now tell me which option. Did you get this part? Did you get the explanation? Right. So if B is not the answer, because say which policy will not cause a reduction in the rate of interest, in the rate of inflation. So reducing interest rates will not, in fact, that will cause even more inflation. Why? Because people will borrow more, they'll spend more, invest more when they do all the more aggregate demand. So when there's more aggregate demand, obviously we know there will be more inflation. So that's not the answer. What else? So if B is incorrect, C is incorrect, what should be the correct answer? Hmm. Hmm. Answer? Okay, you replied D, exactly. So D should be the answer, right? Because when you remove subsidies, what happens when you remove subsidies? The prices increase, right? May, June 2021, and you have May, June 2021. This is 1-2, this is 1-2. Whoa. What has happened to Cambridge? What will not reduce? Which policy will not cause a reduction in the rate of inflation? Not cause a reduction. So which policy will not cause a reduction? Reduction in the rate of inflation. Not cause a reduction. Removing subsidies. Reduction. Just a second. What will not cause a reduction in the rate of inflation? Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to understand. Not cause, reduction. Reduction nahi honi chahiye, right? So when you are reducing interest rates, it's not causing reduction. Yeah, that's correct. When you are, just a second, not cause a reduction. Oh, because removing subsidies. But how come removing subsidies? If you remove subsidies, it will not cause a reduction in the rate of inflation. The supply shifts to the left and prices increase. But then, yeah, subsidies will not be on all the things. Reducing interest rates. So when you reduce and not cause a reduction. Yeah. You were right. Sorry. My bad. Yeah. Ilsa, you were right. Because not cause a reduction in the rate of inflation. So when you reduce interest rates, that means that you will, people will borrow more, spend more. So they will invest more. When they invest more, there will be more inflation and not less inflation. Yeah, my bad, completely my bad. Which policy will not cause a reduction? Yeah, so this policy will not cause a reduction. When you're lowering interest rate, there will be more aggregate demand. More aggregate demand means more inflation. Yeah, got it. And the subsidies part is not that good of an option because removing subsidies will also not cause a reduction. It will result in higher prices, but not to the same extent. because if you remove subsidies, your supply curve shifts to the left, right? When supply shifts to the left, what happens to prices? Prices increase, but then government is obviously not giving subsidies on every other product, right? It's only on selective products, right? Okay, great. Sorry. Which policy aimed at correcting balance of trade deficit is an expenditure reducing policy? Which policy aimed at correcting the balance of trade deficit is an expenditure reducing policy? So do you remember we talked about expenditure reducing and expenditure dampening policy? What was the idea, right? Increase direct taxation, exactly. So when you increase your taxes or when you increase your interest rates, that is a dampening policy, right? Right, very good. So let's check. 29 should be B. 29 is B, very good. 28. Why are higher interest rates together? Why are higher interest rates together with increased taxation on expenditure likely to cause domestic deflation? Higher interest rates with increased taxation on expenditure likely to cause domestic deflation. Because contraction monetary policy will override the expansionary fiscal policy, because the monetary and fiscal policy involved will reinforce each other, because the expansionary monetary policy will override the contraction fiscal policy, because the monetary and fiscal involved will cancel each other out. Interesting. So what do you think is the answer? So you are increasing interest rates on one end and you are increasing taxation on the other hand. What would that mean? Thinking. Okay, take your time. Okay, just think about this. With higher interest rates, Milsa, with higher interest rates, will your spending increase or decrease? Will your spending increase or decrease with higher interest rates? Decrease. Very good. Excellent. And with higher taxation, will your spending increase or decrease? With higher taxation. Right. So, right. Correct. Very good. Now, are the two policies complementing each other? Are the two policies complementing each other or what? Are the two policies complementing each other or what? Yes, right? So think about this. A, B, C, and D says that they are overriding, they are complementing, right? So because the monetary and fiscal were involved will reinforce each other, right? So deflation, and same is the idea with deflation. What is deflation? Prices decrease. So when aggregate demand overall is decreasing, your prices will decrease, right? Yes or no? When aggregate demand is low, there will be less demand for inflation, so prices will have a downward pressure. So the answer should be B, because they're complementing each other. They are complementing each other, right? So 28 should be a B, right? Easy. Okay, great. Next one. Increased international competition leads to worsening in a country's current account balance. In the absence of any offsetting factors, how is this likely to affect the exchange rate and the domestic cost push inflation? Increased competition is worsening a country's current account balance, likely to affect the exchange rate and domestic cost push inflation. Right. 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 What do you think? Yeah. So, okay, think about this. Increased competition Yeah, less exports, aggregate demand falls. Very good. No, 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 no. It's talking about cost push inflation. So think about this. Ilsa, cost push inflation is when you are importing something, right? So with cost push inflation, what happens if the cost of production increases? If the cost of production increases, that is cost push inflation. Now, if you're first think about what will happen to the exchange rate, because that will help you. Think about this. When there's more competition, so let's say it's only not only cars being produced in Pakistan, you can import cheaper cars from across the globe. That is what international competition is. Now, with international competition, we will be able to export less. So when that part is correct, what you said, right? So when there will be lower exports, right, your current account balance is going in deficit, right? It's worsening. Now, when there will be lesser exports because the competition in the international markets is increasing, so your exports would be less. When your exports are less, what happens to your exchange rate? First, think about this. What will happen to your exchange rate? Ilsa? What will happen to your exchange rate? Think again, think again, think again. How are exchange rates determined? The demand and supply. No, no, no. Demand and supply for your currency. Now, when you are exporting, the demand, it affects your demand for currency. When you're exporting something, that affects the demand for your currency. When you're importing something, so in the case of more exports, the demand for your currency increase. And in case of more imports, supply of your currency increase. I repeat, when a country is exporting more, the demand for that currency increases. And when you're importing more, the supply of its currency increases. So when you are exporting less because there's more competition, what will happen to your exchange rate? The demand for your currency will be lower. And with lower demand for your currency, your exports, your exchange rate will depreciate. Exchange rate will depreciate. Is this simple? It will, right. And when now your exchange rate is weaker, think about it. Now, if you have to import something, now if your exchange is depreciating and you have to import something from another country, don't you think raw material I'm talking about? So don't you think that raw material will be more expensive for you? Don't you think that your raw material will be more expensive for you? Right? So that is how it will cause, yes. So cost push inflation is not just about how the cost of production in your own country is increasing. It's also about, you know, that if you have to import anything like the raw material from another country, so that will increase. So the answer should be D. Right? Easy, simple. Okay, let's move to the next question. Between 2011 and 2013, retailers reported that expenditure on domestically produced and imported goods has reduced. This was because consumers did not take out loans as the economy was in a recession. What is likely result of this? A decline in the deficit in the trade account. Okay. A decline in the deficit in trade account, a decline in the level of savings, a decline in terms of trade, a decline in unemployment. What do you think? Yeah, sure. Take your time. Decline in the terms of trade. Right. Okay. Let's do it together. Think about this. The question said that retailers have told that you, like the local people, are spending less on domestically produced goods, so products that are produced in Pakistan. People are spending less on those products, as well as they are spending less on the imported goods. They're spending less on imported goods and locally produced products, right? What was the reason for that? Because consumers are not taking out loans and economy is in recession. What is recession? When there's low aggregate demand. When there's low aggregate demand, that is when the economy is in recession, right? Now think about this. A decline in the deficit in trade account. A decline in the deficit. What is deficit? Deficit is when imports are more and exports are less. So imagine if you are importing less, deficit is exports are greater than your deficit is imports are greater than your exports. So if you are spending less on imported goods, your imports will decrease. If your imports decrease, then right, if your imports decrease, then your deficit should also decrease. Yes or no? If you're importing less, shouldn't your deficit decrease, Ilsa? But obviously it's an MCQ choice, so we will read through the other options as well and make sure that the other options are incorrect. A decline in the level of savings. So to be honest, if you're spending less, your savings should increase, right? So if you're spending less on domestically produced goods, your savings should increase, right? So, I mean, B doesn't make a lot of sense. For the C, a decline in the terms of trade. So again, if your terms of trade, so we have just talked about terms of trade as export prices divided by import prices. So think about this, if you're importing less, your demand for imports is less. So when your demand for imports is less, the price for imported goods should decrease. Think again. A decline in the terms of trade. What is terms of trade? Terms of trade is simply export prices over import prices. So your export prices divided by import prices. So if your imported goods, spending on imported goods is less, so demand for imports is less. And when for the demand for imports is less, overall your TOT, overall your terms of trade will improve because the value in the denominator is decreasing, right? The value in the denominator is decreasing. Does it make sense? Right? Okay. Now this being said, it should be a decline in the terms of trade. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that could be the answer. Decline in the sorry. Not the decline. What is wrong with me? Not a decline. That will be increase in the terms of trade because this is going down. Imported goods prices is going down. So if the value in the denominator goes down, the overall value of this ratio would go up. So terms of trade will improve, not deteriorate, right? Not deteriorate. Sorry, my bad. I got it confused, right? And then a decline in unemployment. No, the simple idea is whenever there is a recession, and you are producing less goods, so unemployment should not decrease, it should increase because you're producing less goods, you need less labor. So overall, your unemployment should increase. Is it making sense? Right? So the only option that makes sense is A. The only option that's making sense here is A, right? So 26 should be A. 26 is A. Is it making sense? Right? Okay. So Ilsa, how about we stop here for today? For tomorrow, if you can complete this paper, right? Complete this paper and whatever problems you will have, I will address those problems first, and then we'll move to the next paper, right? So complete this paper. If you want to go in the same sequence, go in the opposite direction, and then tomorrow we'll only be doing the difficult questions. Right. So is this time workable for you? Tomorrow, this time, like 3 to 4, right? It will be around this time, but if this is good with you, then we can do at the same time. Perfect. So we'll do it at the same time, right? So I'll see you then. Okay. Take care. Bye. Allah Hafiz.